Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a happy, prosperous, good Wednesday. I hope you're doing good, whatever you're doing. And, welcome to the channel where I talk about things. And I am here in northern Israel, as you know, where for the first time in some 14 months, we have, in theory, a ceasefire between Israel and the Iranian-backed terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria and wherever else they operate around the world. So the ceasefire went into effect at 4 a.m. Israel time, Lebanon time, which was about 3 hours and 42 minutes ago. So it's almost 4 hours old and holding. And so far, there have not been any complaint cylinders fired across that border since that ceasefire went into effect. About an hour or a half hour before the ceasefire, Israel did destroy a couple of targets in the southern suburbs of Beirut after calling the residents of the buildings and the areas, telling them to get out of the area because they were about to knock down some buildings, and they sure enough apparently did. And that was the last shots fired of this conflict. Hopefully it will end the conflict, but I wouldn't exactly lose sleep over it. I wouldn't hold my breath just yet. Now, the details of the ceasefire, which I went over with you guys, even though they weren't technically published until the ceasefire were in effect, pretty much everybody knew what they were. There was just maybe one additional thing, but it was already kind of included in what we knew and what I reported to you guys. The details of the ceasefire are that it will basically mean that over a period of 60 days, starting now, the assets of Hezbollah, specifically the people and any rockets or missiles or whatever that they want to take with them, have to go north of the Litani River. They're not supposed to have any presence south of the Litani River, which is a river that is roughly 20 kilometers north of the Israeli border. Well, in some parts it's much closer to the Israeli border, like near Metula and stuff, but for most of the Israeli border, it's about 20 kilometers to the north. And then the Israelis are supposed to start withdrawing in the coming days and weeks, and by day 60 they should be fully withdrawn from Lebanon. During that same time, the southern Lebanese army is supposed to take up guard or take up posts, around 33 posts across southern Lebanon. They have bases all across the country. It's the Lebanese army, so they're supposed to be able to go to man the posts, if you will. But there's 33 specified bases that they have to man. And how many of those people are actually Hezbollah members? A lot, probably half, right? We know that for a fact. But they will be wearing their Lebanese army uniforms, and in theory, they'll be taking Lebanese army instructions and orders to guard the post, man the posts, and not allow Hezbollah to operate in the area. So, and then on top of that, the United States and probably France and maybe some other groups some other countries that may or may not participate in it, are going to form an additional group in addition to the UNIFIL group that exists. They're going to form an additional group to monitor that the agreement is upheld, and we'll see in time if it in fact is upheld. And then on top of that, there's a side letter from the United States that was provided to Israel once the ceasefire went into effect. And the side letter basically says that the U.S. backs Israel's right to defend itself and take whatever measures are necessary to protect itself in the case of any violations of the ceasefire by Hezbollah, which basically means, right, as it is spelled out in the ceasefire agreement and in the side letter, that Israel has the right to go into Lebanon and take actions against military, against militant actions or terrorist actions by Hezbollah if Hezbollah does anything like shoot rockets at Israel, right, or do other terrorist activity against Israel, right? So if we find them starting to build terror tunnels again, or if we find them, loading up arms from Iran into specific weapons depots south of the Litani River or anything like that, right? If we find them setting up base camps, right, or we see them putting those things in like the homes of people who live south of the Litani River, those weapons, like Israel found many rockets and other things in the houses in South Lebanon, like in the homes of regular people. Well, then, Israel will go in and do what it has to do, and the conflict will theoretically resume. And basically, the ceasefire is just a short-term band-aid. We were here in 2006. Hezbollah attacked Israel and just sent many, many rockets and other complaint cylinders into Israel, thousands and thousands of them. And for weeks, right, there was this raging conflict, and the Israelis had to send boots on the ground into South Lebanon to do whatever it had to do kinetically to force the Hezbollah to get out and to force them to stop doing what they were doing. Eventually, they agreed to a ceasefire that was brokered by the UN. And they agreed to, or brokered by, member nations of the UN and all that, the same usual political clowns. And they created UN Resolution 1701. And not for one moment did Hezbollah ever honor that agreement. Israel did, right? It left southern Lebanon, after their brief entrance into it, which Israel did not want to go back into Lebanon. It had just left Lebanon 6 years earlier, after being there since the 80s. It had spent almost 20 years there, 18 years or something. They had no interest in being southern Lebanon. It was there for like 18 or 17 years or something, like 1982 until 2000. So Israelis did not want to be in southern Lebanon. We lost too many soldiers, securing Israel by having a physical presence in that land. And Israelis were like, just get them out. We don't need to have our soldiers there. So eventually we left. In 2006, Hezbollah attacked us again, just to show us whatever, that they're, hey, we have a lot of rockets or something. So we had to have a war with them. And then that resolution 1701, Hezbollah never honored for one moment. They were lying as they signed the paper, and they violated the agreement by never leaving the areas south of the Litani River, and they continuously rearmed and resupplied their stocks of weapons south of the Litani River. So it was very obvious that they had no interest in honoring the agreement whatsoever. The only thing that they agreed to was for Israel to stop shooting at them, because they were, not as powerful as they are now. They had maybe 20 or 30,000 people back then in their organization. Now they've got probably double that. And who knows, maybe in another 20 years they'll have double that again. And then instead of a 60,000 people army, we'll be facing a 120,000 person army. And maybe they'll triple or quadruple their weapons supply. So instead of having 150,000 rockets, they'll have 500,000 or more. It's very easily conceivable that Iran will just keep sending them more weapons, and they'll just keep recruiting more terrorists, and eventually they'll have, hundreds of thousands of people right? Especially when you consider their economy and everything else. Like, what else are they going to do in that country? So I would not exactly say that this is a great day for peace or anything like that. No, it's not. This is a great day to have a little bit of breathing if it holds. It's not even 4 hours old yet. Who knows what they'll do? But if it holds, then yay, it's a great day. We have some rest from this. But at the same time, Hamas is still shooting rockets into Israel. That hasn't stopped. There's still over 100 people from Israel being held as terrorists, as hostages by the terrorists of Hamas in Gaza. And they're being held in the most inhumane conditions and being brutally abused, not fed well, God knows what. The worst things you can imagine, those things are happening to them. How do we know? Because people who survived it have told us, right? They said it very clearly. They were abused systematically in very horrible ways. So, hope and pray for the people who are still captured by the Hamas in Gaza to come home free and to be alive, as many of them as possible, ASAP. I mean, when I say hope and pray, I don't necessarily mean pray, unless you happen to be religious or a person who prays. I just mean, hope in your heart that the people who are held captive will be free soon. And if you do pray, then pray, by all means. Maybe that helps. Who knows? I don't know. I don't pretend to be an expert on that topic. What I will say is, this horrible 16-month period or 14-month period of war that we've had here with these rockets flying back and forth has, look, it's not been the worst thing in the universe, but it is not fun constantly having to live under the threat of rockets and other complaint cylinders, right? It is something that nobody should have to suffer through. When I say it's not the worst thing in the world, I of course mean that for people who have not died or been, severely injured or people who have loved ones who have been killed or injured or had their houses destroyed or other property destroyed, right? So it hasn't been fun. It's been bad. There have been, of course, worse conflicts in terms of damage, but that's not the point, right? And the only reason that Israel hasn't suffered as much as like Lebanon has in this conflict, or Hezbollah specifically, is because we have better defense systems. And that is a result of investing in R&D for defense systems, which is a very, very important thing, as people can see. And it's also important to invest in intelligence and to listen to the intelligence when it gives you specific information, and to not ignore information that says, hey, these bad guys are likely to attack. You should probably do something about it. Unfortunately, that intelligence was ignored in Gaza. And that intelligence, even though it hasn't been reported, was probably ignored in Lebanon as well, where clearly this didn't just happen out of thin air. Right? They knew Hamas was going to attack. Did they know they were going to attack on October 7th specifically? Maybe, maybe not. But when they found out, did they start jumping the gun, so to speak, to do everything they possibly could to attack Israel as quickly as they could? Absolutely, 100%. That's not even a question. So, all right. That said, folks, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Peace.